Hello and welcome to Think Like Toppers Daily Current Affairs. So we missed the daily current affairs since last 3 days. So let us do all 3 days, that is 13, 14, 15th, all 3 days current affairs in this video. Myself Girish. So please do subscribe to TLT if you want any kind of same content with regard to current affairs pertaining to competitive exams. So here in TLT we refine the content to just what is needed to the examination. We just cut all those clutters which is not required for the examination, just in order to make the preparations easy and fun in learning. So let's get started. So the first article with regard to the social issues, we have something related to the healthcare, that is the tuberculosis crisis which is going on in India and around the world. Many might feel that TB is not anymore a public health crisis, but the real scenario is in the opposite side, because India is one of the main burden countries in the world, having nearly a big share of global cases of the TB. So let's dive deep into the article to know about that. So at 25.3 lakh cases, India recorded TB notifications in 2023. That means the main problem to mitigate the TB crisis in India was under reporting. But this quantum of reporting the cases has been increasing year on year, so that the government and the private sector healthcare facilities are better ready to cope up with the mitigation of these cases, rather than letting it grow in a larger extent and leading to deaths. Because in 2022 India had notified 24 lakh cases, which the India TB report 2023 remarked as the milestone year for TB surveillance efforts in India. This quantum of cases has been increased in 2023. So this indicates that the surveillance program is fruitful in India. So there are many efforts taken by Government of India to end TB with the global institutions like WHO, World Bank, and let's see about that. First and foremost, TB, tuberculosis, it is caused by the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is a bacterial infection which affects the lungs directly, and we need to be very much careful that it is not a viral infection. So these kind of facts are very important from the prelims point of view, where confusing statements can be given by UPSC. For example, TB is caused by viral infection. All of a sudden, in that intense stress, we somewhere forget that this basic fact that it is caused by a bacterial infection, because when we able to recollect this particular bacteria's name, that is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, we will be able to recognize the true or the false sentence. So, and it is airborne. Some of the symptoms are coughing, blood sputum, chest pain, etc. So there is a crisis for TB, that is the drug resistance. The main crisis for not mitigating this TB disease in India is the drug resistance, and this is caused due to negligence or not accessing the public health care immediately. Lack of awareness is one of the main causes to leading for the highest burden of tuberculosis cases in India, that is the multi-drug resistance and the extreme drug resistance. When the TB is irresponsive to these drugs like isocyanide, rifampicin, it is considered as a case of multi-drug resistance. Further, when it is neglected, without periodic medication and interventions from the doctors, it leads to extensive drug resistance. That means almost first line and second line drugs become irresponsive to the curing. Further, there is a report by WHO annually released named Global TB Report, and this tracks the global TB burden. Global TB target is to end TB by 2030. The report also says India has the highest burden with 27% of the global share of the cases at 2.8 million cases. And the main issue with India is, as I said, underreporting of the cases, difficult to track, a lack of awareness of negligence. And the threat of TB is to such a vast extent that it became the second leading cause of death after COVID-19 in 2023. Look at the intensity, how TB is threatening the public health globally, not just in India, but globally. And it kills twice as HIV or AIDS virus does. And the highest burden nations are India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Congo, Indonesia. Many of these nations are Asian nations, that to South and Southeast Asia. Further, the fatality ratio remained at 12% in India due to the TB burden, and that accounts nearly 1.1 lakh cases due to multi-drug resistant TB in India. India's efforts to mitigate this TB burden is the National Strategic Plan from 2017 to 2025, the Nikshay ecosystem, that is the TB information system to track the reporting of the TB with proper awareness. The campaign is called the TB Harega Desh Jeetega campaign to increase the awareness among the rural areas especially. The Nikshay Poshan Yojana, which is a DBT scheme, direct benefit transfer scheme of 500 rupees monthly for the TB patients to access good food and medicines for periodic mitigations of the TB, and an aim to end TB by 2030 with the help of World Bank and Government of India. So the second article is with regard to the issue of Uniform Civil Code. In a latest visit to the state of Uttarakhand, the Defence Minister has opined that that state will likely to be the first state to implement UCC across India. So UCC is a social concept wherein having a common personal laws irrespective of the religions. So we all know that India is a multi-religious nation. That means world's major religions reside in India: Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Sikhs, etc. Apart from Hindus as majority, there are 6 minority religions in India. So UCC aims to secure common personal law across these religions irrespective of their culture, instead of having personal laws separate for each religion. That means at present what we have is personal laws which is different for Hindus, Muslims, Christians. Under Hindus, for example, Hindu Marriage Act or Hindu Succession Act, it is applicable to Hindus, Buddhists, Jains and Sikhs. And for another example, the implementation of the Sharia law under the Muslim personal law is also present in India. So UCC aims to codify these personal laws across the religions into one law which is applicable to all the religions irrespective of their culture, and this is given under the provision of the directive principles of the state policy, that is part 4 of the constitution under article 44. That is, it says the state shall endeavor to secure its citizens a uniform civil code. So under article 44, the state is compelled to secure its citizens a uniform civil code. That means the state is empowered to form a uniform civil code. So however, this uniform civil code in a multi-religious India is of a debate, subject to debate, and it is also an ethical dilemma between the concepts of secularism and cultural autonomy. These two concepts are promised by our very constitution itself, meaning some might argue that UCC stands for a secular policy, and whoever opposes UCC can argue that cultural autonomy under article 25 to 28 is given to its citizens. So this is the dilemma we are facing right now. At last, what we have to do is to meet at the consensus, to gain the trust of each and every religion and make a UCC with wider consultation. That is what the way forward for a multicultural country like India. So let us jump into the section of polity and governance. So we have an article with regard to the latest law which is passed on appointments of the chief election commissioners and the election commissioners. So the bench of the Supreme Court issues notice to the center and lists the case for hearing in April. That means Supreme Court came out with a judgment that Prime Minister, LOP of Lok Sabha and the Chief Justice of India should be part of the panel while selecting the candidate for CEC and EC posts. So this was the judgment which is a result of the outcome of the petition filed at the top court challenging the interference by the executive, which is a threat to free and fair elections in India. So the petition was mainly based on protecting the independence of the Election Commission of India, because Election Commission under Article 324 clearly envisages to be an independent body as per our constitutional makers. So when this judgment came out in the Election Commission case, the central government in the winter session brought in a law to overturn the judgment. So the law removed the CJI, that is the Chief Justice of India, as part of the panel. Instead, it added the cabinet minister nominated by the Prime Minister to be part of the 3-member panel in selection of the candidates to CEC and ECs. So this clearly projected the supremacy of the executive, that is the government, in appointing the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners. So this particular law has now been again challenged in the Supreme Court, wherein the Supreme Court refused to stay the law. So this is what the article says about. The Supreme Court on Friday declined to stay the new law, which brushed aside the top court judgment to include CJI as a member of the high-powered selection committee to appoint Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners. So this is the highlight of this article. So from UPSC perspective, this is not where we stop. From UPSC point of view, we need to dig in to the law. Before looking into what the text of the law says, clear facts is about Article 324, which brings in an independent election commission of India. And this election commission of India is empowered to conduct elections to the parliament, to the state legislature. The election commission of states is the body which conducts elections to the local bodies. So we need to be remembering that. Okay. Further, further in just you can open Lakshmikant. If you open Lakshmikant under 42nd section, you have a whole lesson about election commission. So it clearly says that Article 324 of the Constitution provides that the power of superintendence, direction and control of elections to the Parliament, state legislatures, office of President of India and Vice President of India. As I said, Parliament, state legislature, President and Vice President. All these four elections are superintendence, direction and control of these elections are vested with the election commission. This election commission is an all India body in the sense that it is common to both central government and state governments. And here it must be noted that the election commission is not concerned with the elections of panchayats and urban local bodies. So it is vested with the election commission of the states. Further, the composition of the election commission is like this. It consists of Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioner. Previously, it was a 2-member body. In 1989, under 61st constitutional amendment, the voters age was reduced from 21 to 18 years. So this composition is decided by the President of India. So when this particular amendment was passed in 1989, the President decided to expand the Election Commission of India to a 3-member body. So from the security point of view, to protect the independence of the Election Commission, so the Chief Election Commissioner is provided with the security tenure, that is, once he is appointed, cannot be removed until and unless there is a special majority resolution passed by the parliament. Special majority resolution means the 2/3 majority, not the simple majority of just 50% plus 1. 2/3 majority is more than 50%, that is 66% of members present and voting. And the service conditions of the Chief Election Commissioner cannot be varied to the disadvantage after his appointment, and any other election commissioner or the regional commissioners cannot be removed from office except on recommendation of the CEC. This is one of the point for independence of the office of CEC, but it is also a critic of where the tenures of the election commissioners are not protected, since the Chief Election Commissioner just merely on his recommendations can be able to remove a election commissioner who is dissenting his opinion or dissenting his ideas, for example. So further, let us have a look into the text of the legislation which is brought recently. So as you all see on the screen, this is a simple PDF from the PRS Legislative Research website, which is a very important website for the aspirants of UPSC, since this website gives you the exact analysis of those latest bills or acts passed by the parliament. So the highlights of the bill is: the bill replaces Election Commission Conditions of the Services of Election Commissioners and Transactions of Business Act of 1991, and it provides for appointment, salary, removal of CEC and election commissioners. CEC and ECs will be appointed by the President, recommended by a selection committee, and that selection committee comprises of Prime Minister, Cabinet Minister, Leader of Opposition of the largest party in Lok Sabha, and the recommendations of the select committee will be valid even when there is a vacancy in this committee. That means even when there is a vacancy in this committee means that if any one person is not present in this 3-member committee, even then the recommendations are valid. So a search committee headed by the Cabinet Secretary will propose panel of names to the selection committee, and the eligibility for the posts includes holding or having held a post equivalent to secretary to the central government. Salary and conditions of the service of the CEC and ECs will be equivalent to that of Cabinet Secretary. And the key issues and analysis is the selection process of the Election Commission may be dominated by the government, so which has implications for its independence. That means when the executive interference in the election process is literally diminishes the level playing field which is needed in a vibrant democracy. It is really a challenge for free and fair elections, which is also a basic structure of the constitution. Accepting the selection committee's recommendations in spite of a vacancy in its constitution may effectively lead to a monopoly of the government members in the selecting candidates. For example, just consider in that 3-member selection committee, if the leader of opposition is absent, so it will be a monopoly of the government. That is, the Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers are literally having a monopoly in selection of the candidates. So further, making the CEC and EC's salary equivalent to Cabinet Secretary, it may lead to the government's influence as it is fixed by the government. Since the salaries are equivalent to Cabinet Secretaries, it leads to the power of the government to fix these salaries of the chief election commissioners and the election commissioners. So this really interference in the security of the office of CEC and ECs. So CECs and ECs also perform quasi-judicial functions. For example, consider the dispute between the split of Shiv Sena in Maharashtra, where Uddhav Thackeray claimed the same symbol of that bow and arrow, and the Eknath Shinde faction also claimed the same symbol of bow and arrow. So this dispute with regard to the party symbols is decided only by the election commission. So at that time it performs the quasi-judicial function. So after the orders of the election commission, it can be appealed in the Supreme Court. So this is one of the quasi-judicial functions. Let's discuss the powers and functions in detail further. I'll just read out it from Indian Polity. Just listen to it. So election commission performs 3 functions altogether. It performs 3 functions, that is administrative, quasi-judicial, and advisory functions. First is to determine the territorial areas of electoral constituency throughout the country on the basis of Delimitation Commissions Act of the Parliament. To prepare and periodically revise electoral rolls and to register all the eligible voters. Third, to notify the dates and schedules of elections, to scrutinize nomination of the papers, to grant recognition to political parties and allot election symbols, to act as a court for settling disputes related to granting of recognition to political parties, and to appoint officers for inquiring into disputes relating to electoral arrangements, to determine code of conduct to be observed by the parties, to prepare a roster for publicity of the policies of the political parties, to advise the President on matters related to disqualification of the members of the Parliament, similarly to advise the Governor with regard to disqualification of the MLAs of the state legislature, to cancel the polls in the event of rigging, booth capturing, to request the President or the Governor for requisitioning of the staff necessary for conducting elections, to supervise the machinery of elections throughout the country, to advise the President whether the elections can be held in a state under the President's rule. So this cannot extend beyond 3 years. President's rule cannot be extended beyond 3 years. So that we need to be aware of. To register the political parties for the purpose of elections and grant them the status of national and state parties. So this was all about the issue of chief election commissioners and the election commissioners appointment process, which is presently a hot debate since we are heading to the elections in this very year. So as we said, the free and fair elections and the level playing fields are the basic structures of the constitution. So some of the guiding principles of election commissioner is to uphold these values enshrined in the constitution, that is equality, equity, impartiality and independence, to conduct elections with the highest standards of credibility, freeness, fairness, transparency and integrity, to ensure participation of all eligible citizens in the electoral process, to promote electoral awareness among the citizens, to adopt technology to improve the area of the electoral process, to strive for adoption and innovation process for achieving excellence in overall realization of the vision and the mission enshrined in the Constitution. So coming to international relations, we have the news with regard to the crisis which is going on in the Red Sea part. So this part, this is Red Sea, this is Suez Canal, this is Suez Canal, this is Red Sea, and this is Gulf of Aden. This is Red Sea, and this is where Yemen is located. Yemen is the base for Houthi rebels. Since their capture of the capital of Yemen, that is Sana'a, so the Houthi rebels recently have launched an offensive act to attack the trade ships, the commercial ships which is moving through these sea route. So this is a very busy sea route and which is very crucial for the shipment movement for Asian nations like India and China. And it is one of the busiest trade routes connecting Asia and Europe. So since they have launched this kind of offensive acts, the US UK has launched the counter strikes against the Houthi targets to suppress their aggressive policy measures to assert their power in this region. Further, the defense minister had a diplomatic visit to UK recently, and there was a MOU signed between India and United Kingdom for getting the electric propulsion technology from United Kingdom to meet the future of needs of Indian warships. So Indian warships at present do not have electric propulsion system. They are run by diesel engines, gas or steam turbines. So this could be a game changer for India's maritime policy and also an elevation of Indo-UK ties. So at present there is a negotiation going on for FTA between India and UK also. So we have many joint exercises, training of capability buildings and increasing interoperability, military to military ties, especially in the maritime domain. So recently there was when the defense minister visited recently, so they issued a official statement that UK Navy to be trained in India. So the growing military ties is also the growing influence of India in European nations. So further, we have a news that when South Africa has filed a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. So this article deals with the evaluation of the body of International Court of Justice, which is a judicial organ of the United Nations. The International Court of Justice, the UN's highest judicial body, is once again in news because South Africa filed a case accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Over 23,000 Palestinians have been dead and 90% of Gaza's population have been displaced recently in the conflict between Israel and the Hamas. So Hamas is a Palestine-based rebel group. So seated in the Peace Palace in The Hague, the Netherlands, the ICJ was established in 1945 by the Charter of the United Nations, following by the decades of international conflict, that is the 2 world wars. Further, the multilateral forum has dual jurisdictional powers, that is 2 jurisdictional powers, that is advisory powers and the jurisdiction in the contentious cases. The jurisdiction of the court in providing legal opinions on the matters referred to it by the organs of the United Nations, and the settling disputes between the countries and determining state responsibilities in violation of the international code. For example, China has been a belligerent country in South China Sea dispute, so it can be dragged to the International Court of Justice. For example, in Russia-Ukraine war. So further, the ICJ was established after its predecessor, the Permanent Court of International Justice, fell into inability to enforce its mandate during the intervening years of the world wars. The court has a total strength of 15 judges who are appointed for a 9-year term. These are the facts which are very important from the exam point of view. And through the separate simultaneous elections held by United Nations General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council. However, the ad hoc judges, that is the temporary judges, are sometimes appointed in the cases that require specialized knowledge. The ICJ judges ought to be impartial and cannot act as extensions of their countries. That means the judges appointed to the ICJ cannot act in accordance to the international political policies what their native countries follow. For example, Dhalvir Bhandari. Dhalvir Bhandari is an Indian origin judge appointed to International Court of Justice. Dhalvir Bhandari is a Indian origin judge appointed as a judge at the International Court of Justice. So he favored a provisional measure against Russia had been misconceived to be he favored to vote for a provisional measures against Russia, which was literally contradicting the policies of abstention followed by India. So that kind of neutrality has to be followed by the judges of the ICJ. So further, we can see that there is no enforcement powers at the hands of the ICJ. The court's decision is legally binding, but it cannot be appealed against. They are often defied in the absence of the enforcement mechanisms. The UN Charter authorizes the UNSC to enforce the court's decision. However, its compliance is often at the mercy of the power politics. That means the UNSC is entrusted to implement the orders ordered by the International Court of Justice. And this UNSC is influenced by the permanent members. That means the political power is at the core of implementing the orders by the ICJ, which makes it nearly a puppet at the hands of the P5 members. For example, when there is a judgment against Israel in this very case, its strong ally, that is the US, can veto it at the UNSC. So when there is a case filed in Russia-Ukraine case, if the ICJ holds the accountability of Russia being a belligerent power against Ukraine, the Russia itself vetoes such orders at the UNSC. So when this kind of political power is at play, the independence of the ICJ is also questionable in recent years, which has been increasing due to the rivalry among US, Russia and China. So when this goes on, the relevance of the presence of ICJ itself diminishes. The court's advisory role has also played an enormous role in advancing peaceful solutions to the conflicts and supporting diplomatic efforts. So this point can be one of the plus points of the ICJ, that is the advisory role. For example, the legality of the threat or the use of nuclear weapons in 1996, legal consequences of the construction of a wall in the Palestine occupied territory in 2004. The UNGA in 2022 passed a resolution calling on the ICJ to give its advisory opinion on legal consequences of Israel's illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory. So these are one of the advantages and the disadvantages of the International Court of Justice. So that's all for now. If you really like the video, please do like, share and subscribe to TLT. Myself Girish, and let us build an informed community through Think Like Toppers channel at the YouTube. So if you need any kind of improvement from my side, I do need some improvement from my side for better teaching for you guys. So I might be improving day by day. Please do support my channel. Let us go forward together. Thank you.